This is Ava Jarvis with Solo Boarding, talking about the Doctor Who Solitaire story game. We're going to cover what I did wrong in my playthrough, and the good parts of the story game and the bad parts of the story game as a whole. So, the adventures of the Ninth Doctor in Depression-era New York, where he ran into the cult of Scarrow, that was a disaster. I do believe that I did roll a d6 afterwards to determine what happened to the Doctor after his ultimate failure, and it said no effect. But I'm pretty sure that it did not help his psyche at all that Earth was annihilated by the cult of Scarrow, of all things. So, what could we have done better? Now, this is the part I really like about the Solitaire story game, is that even when I lose, when I look back, it's always because I screwed something up. Yes, there's the luck of the dice. If the dice had been just a little bit nicer here and there, I might have pulled through, like with a self-sacrifice or something like that. Was pretty much my best bet towards the end of that game. But even then, there were things that I could have done much better. Now, the basics of this is, one of the basic things that I did wrong was not using scaling. I know I said it was an advanced concept and that I would talk about it later, but this is pretty much kind of like easy mode for Lord of the Rings, the card game. You need, if you are just engaging with the game for the first time, or you're running into something like the Daleks, you probably want to use scaling. Now, scaling allows you, unlike easy mode in Lord of the Rings, the card game, allows you to actually scale the adventure, because this is a campaign where you strengthen as you progress through it, unlike Lord of the Rings, the card game, where you actually weaken as you go through a campaign. So Doctor Who Solitaire story game, you get stronger as the campaign continues. So the scaling actually starts making your enemies harder and harder to match with your growth. And it even has rules so that you end with this astonishing finale and you have exciting episodes in your second season of your campaign where you face old enemies seeking revenge and stuff like that. It's really neat the way the campaign mode works in the Solitaire story game. I've yet to see whether Lord of the Rings, the card game, saga expansions for the Lord of the Rings will do the same thing. I'm very excited for that. I haven't done it yet. So, anyways, no more comparisons. These are two separate entities, but I really love the storytelling in the Doctor Who Solitaire story game. So, anyways, first thing I did wrong, not using scaling. Scaling would have basically nixed the Daleks. We wouldn't have to deal with an enemy that had a -2 DM. We'd have at most a 0 DM modifier enemy. And that makes a huge difference. Because if you looked at the game while I was struggling along, there was no way I was going to get to 7 DM, which was what was needed to defeat the Daleks in the turns that I had remaining. Even assuming every single dice roll went my way, it wouldn't have happened. So that was an unfortunate thing. I wouldn't have been able to oppose, which removes one of my options for defeating the cult of Scarrow, unfortunately. There are other things that remain, like defeat enemies, but you need to score 13 plus in order to oppose, even if you don't have the DM to do it. So, up in the air. So, scaling. When you embark on your adventures for the first time, I recommend using scaling and doing a full campaign, or as long as you can survive the campaign. You can regenerate, so, you know, not that bad, but the other thing I did wrong was letting the group remain split for too long. Once I knew that the enemy was the Daleks, I should have gotten everybody back together immediately so that we didn't have to deal with people having to try to deal with the Daleks as mere human beings without me being there to protect them. So basically that was another screw up. The minute I knew it was the Daleks, I should have just immediately gone hunting for Tallulah and Kathika and just gotten everybody backed in together. The third thing I did wrong was not retreating to the TARDIS to rally the troops. So there was an unfortunate thing where the only location that I knew of apart from the TARDIS was that of the enemy base, and you can't rally troops in the enemy base. Now, the special thing about rallying troops in this adventure is that it would have given me +2 DM if I had three troops rallied when I do a rally troops. So that I could have just rallied the troops over and over and gotten the DM that I needed to oppose, and also gotten a little army of people to go fight the Daleks, fight the mercenaries, and all that stuff. So it would have come to my mind easier if there was a location other than the TARDIS, but there wasn't at that time, and oh well, lesson learned. Also, the fourth thing I did wrong was that I squandered my luck points. I hate to say this, but I probably should have let Kathika and Bob die to the Daleks. It's a cruel thing to say, but a Time Lord, or a Time Lady, or a Time Person, anyways, needs to make difficult decisions like that. It was either them or the world, possibly, and wrong decision made. So, but who knows whether the luck would have worked out or not. In any case, luck points were squandered needlessly, and I should not have done that. I also should not have squandered the luck point trying to rescue the prisoners, because I could have just done that on the next turn, and so squandered away. Don't do that. And what else should I have done? Ah yes, taking into account the Daleks, I mentioned this, but in particular, I should have recognized that the -2 DM would be a great setback for me, especially with all the occasions when you're fighting against the Daleks for your DM to go down. That they are probably the toughest enemy in the entire game, and I just happen to have the sheer luck of running into them. Although if I used scaling, I wouldn't have run into them. I would have run into like clockwork robots or something, and that would have been actually doable. I know because I did it in an adventure just before this one. So I lost, and horribly, but I know why I lost. And I can see an alternate universe where I did things differently and it would have worked out. Or would have had a better chance of working out anyways. There's still the luck of the dice, but I don't know. There's just a lot of strategy inherent in this storytelling game, which is not always the case for paragraph games. I mean, look at Arabian Nights. There's not much strategy there. I don't actually have much experience with other paragraph games, except for Sherlock Holmes, Consulting Detective. That's also a good paragraph game, but I think this one blows it out of the water entirely. For replayability purposes, unmatched. Definitely not the Sherlock Holmes games, not going to match it. And strategy-wise, Arabian Nights has a lot going on there, so replayability is high, but strategy is low. Doctor Who's Solitaire story game strikes that excellent sweet spot between I can do stuff, I can strategize, and I have a lot of possibilities that can unfold when I do so. So, even the session I had, which, you know, ended in flames and fire and death for the entire planet Earth, was still good. The story being built up was interesting. There were paragraphs I hadn't run into before popping up, and the romantic interlude was a pleasant surprise. Just, oh, it would have been so much better if Tallulah was there. I could have gotten luck points, and another reason why the group should never have separated, or at least should have gotten back together much, much sooner than what they did. So the other thing which I covered in one of the other videos is that, you know, the pig slaves were from a not very good episode. But at the same time, I noticed that the pig slaves, the pyroviles, and other things like that are taken from episodes that were not great and then just sort of reused in a new context that actually made them a viable part of the new story ecosystem that they became part of. And that to me is fascinating and interesting, and it has a potential to revive those parts of Doctor Who that kind of sucked. Except for Love and Monsters, I don't think anything can save that. But apart from that, everything else seems to be on the table. That's another plus for the Solitaire story game. And parts from that were from good episodes are just made better. Like the Daleks, the Cult of Skaro, anything to do with the Daleks, the Cybermen, even various villains from the past history of the Doctor. The Beast was way more scary than any episode I've seen of the Doctor. It was much more scary to deal with in person, as it were, in a storytelling game. So, and there's tons and tons and tons of content. Even accounting for the stuff that's locked away in the wiki right now, like the Quest of Tears, that's not accessible. Shh! I've got a way to access it for some time. I'm sure that'll go away soon. So, there is a way to, anyways, so lots of material, tons of stuff to go through. Even if you only did the core set for a while, you could get a lot of mileage out of that. And there's even more adventures, and then there are expansions that just deepen the story. For instance, giving your companions personalities, giving your Doctor abilities, which are like characteristics that give them advantages in some areas and disadvantages in others. And you have to pick a set of abilities, 3 abilities that their values equal out to 0. So you got some bad and got some good in you, which is the best part of Doctor Who. So, yeah, just a lot of stuff, a lot of depth. Simon Kogan did an amazing amount of work. I can't believe that he did all this on his doubtless copious, not really, spare time. And I'm not surprised that he's taking a little break right now, because I sure would too after 3 years of intensely producing story material that covers surely in the tens of thousands of words by now. So, I have experienced this game, and I've experienced something like, I think 5 adventures in this game, which I know doesn't sound like much, but it's just sort of like every time I experience it, it's like so filling to me. And perhaps one of my challenges in 2015 is to run through a whole season, as it were, a whole campaign, and see where it leads me. So there are the more astonishing stories created by me, and with the help of the Doctor Who story, Solitaire story game, is a blog called The Architect, where I have a time lady, or whatever, time person, who is a woman, and she regenerates into a new form in her own TARDIS, and she goes off and has adventures, and she decides to call herself the Architect. And in that storyverse, she read about the Doctor, the Corsair, etc. in the Adventures of the Adventurer series made for small children on Gallifrey. And so she's now on her very own adventures, and she managed to survive her first one. I haven't played her since because I'm very scared she might not survive the second one. She has a companion, and the way they got together is beautiful. At least, well, story terms, it was kind of beautiful. I'm not sure in my retelling terms that it's beautiful because I'm not totally sure of my way with words sometimes. Then there's At What Price Victory, which was a first Doctor adventure that involved, first of all, the Moth People planet, which is a whole level ridiculous, but contrasted with the enemy happened to be the Beast. Think Satan on a bad day, and you have the Beast. Basically, companions got possessed, driven mad. If you remember, the first Doctor started with his daughter Susan. Well, she actually killed him in this episode. And yeah, it got dark. And that was a whole, the stories that are created by this engine can be so different from one another. Then I had a little jaunt with the 8th Doctor, where they went, he and Charlotte, I believe her name is, went to future dying in luxury Venice, where people are having parties and I'm sure orgies, celebrating the end of the flooding city. And there are these clockwork robots in Venice that are trying to, I forget what they were trying to do, but we defeated them, and it was just a jolly adventure. It was fun. I thought that, you know, the 9th Doctor one would be fun as well, and yeah, that didn't happen. That was hardcore Dalek stuff. Yeah. But in its own way, it was still fun. Now, the bad. Well, actually, there's not very much that's bad. The downsides are, for one thing, this is a fan project. It's never going to get blessings from the BBC. In fact, the BBC could just come and crush everything right now. They just don't choose to do so. So this will never become an app that you can run on your iPhone or your Android device or your Kindle. It just won't happen. Even if you just had web links, I'm sure the BBC would not be amused. There are some stories like the Quest of Tears that are currently locked away on the wiki. They were basically promotional event type things, and after they were finished, they were not republished, as it were to speak, in a new booklet or anything, so not available to people who prefer to print and play rather than to work off of the wiki. So that's a downside for us who like to work with the paper and dice and roll real things and take real notes on real paper and stuff. I like that too from time to time. The wiki, well, at least pencil and paper don't crash like my computer did. So yeah, I feel those are really nitpicky things though, because of the huge amount of content that's already there. And we just need to, the BBC seems to be not in a crushing us mood, so we seem to be fine there. But no, this is just an absolutely excellent game. In fact, for basically the very first game, more or less reviewed by Solo Boarding, this one gets a Solo Boarding seal of excellence. And it does, the reason I do this, I give it that seal of excellence, is because it does 3 things that I feel every Solitaire game should do. Now, number 1, you should provide a challenge that's not insurmountable. Now, that's sort of like, but Ava, you wanted to do easy mode and whatever. Yeah, well, there are still a lot of challenges in easy mode. If you've not done Dull Goldor in easy mode, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not easy. But basically the challenge, there should be a challenge there, and it should not be insurmountable. I should not, be at the mercy of the dice. I should have done stuff wrong in order to lose. And a little bit of luck is okay, but tons of it that I couldn't mitigate, that's not okay. Number 2, needs to yield a skeleton that stories can be hung off of easily. Now this is a little iffy because, you've got your more abstract games like Gates of Loyang and Glass Road that don't do this, but they are still excellent games. So but maybe I need to come up with a number 2 for games that are more abstract. But this is the number 2 for games that are not abstract, that claim to tell a story. There should be a way for that story to actually reel out. I shouldn't feel that events are entirely disconnected. I should feel that they develop organically, like out of the advantages and disadvantages of my character, these things happened. Number 3, it should have depth. A solitaire game should have some sort of depth to it. Like, I don't know, depth can be defined in so many ways. Like, for instance, there's depth of story, which is what I'm talking about here mostly. There's depth in terms of pure material content, which is also what I'm talking about here. But then again, there's also depth in terms of just being able to come up with different situations each time that you need to solve. And I think that's what I really mean by plenty of material, which is there should be a large exploration space. So those are the things I look for in at least a thematic solitaire game. In a less thematic game, number 2 will have a different definition, but 1, 2, and 3 basically solid for a thematic game. Challenge that's not insurmountable, not unmitigatable. Yields a skeleton that stories can be hung off of easily and make sense. And deep exploration space. You do that, you get the solo boarding seal of excellence. You don't do that, you can get the solo boarding seal of approval. And if you come close, you get the solo boarding seal of almost. And if you don't do any of those and you are a thematic solitaire, I just won't review you, because what can I really do or say that would be fun for any of us? So that's my view on the matter. Oh, and yes, this is Mr. T. Yes, I love my shirts. They're awesome shirts. You should see the math one. The multiple math ones. Anyways, this is Ava Jarvis with Solo Boarding, signing off. Hope you enjoyed it. And yes, you can tell that my asthma is acting up. Happy New Year, and welcome to 2015. It is 11 minutes into 2015 for me, so now it's time to cut and edit. I love doing that. Actually, I do, so goodbye.